to build a career? This question is important to a lot of people, mostly because people want money. Sometimes they feel like they're stuck and that they can't get their foot in the door. Maybe they missed the boat on the industry, things like that. If you don't know, I'm Cole. This is my channel all about lifestyle design, general success, my hobbies, and things like that. The first video I wanted to make is about careers, but the main reason is because this is going to be your financial foundation. There's lots of things when it comes to building a fun and interesting life that require money. I tend to think that getting more money is something that is within the control of most people. Instead of just telling people to work harder, I thought maybe I could try to break down some steps on how you can actually build a career, get your needs met, and really start developing a holistic life that you love. So, my good friend Big Money, you can see on this billboard, he says a 9 to 5 ain't corny, but being broke is. Now, let's explore how to get out of our corny situation. First things first is picking what career you want. And a lot of people say things like, do what you love and you'll find a way to make money, or just figure it out and fumble through life and eventually the perfect path will come to you. And that's not true at all. Really, what you should do is use these 3 methods to narrow down your career choices. First, what pays well? Obviously, this is going to secure your basic needs like we talked about, but it's also going to put you on a path to financial independence. And really, I'll make a video on this another time, but financial independence is having enough money where you can choose to have a job that maybe pays less than the most you could ever make. And you can still retire, and you can get other options as well. So, to narrow down different jobs that pay well, you can use websites like Glassdoor, which is great, LinkedIn, and Reddit. They will all give you info about how much jobs may pay in your area, how available they are, and things like that. Sadly, there are not many tech jobs in the middle of Nebraska. Second, you want to focus on what you can learn. And what I mean by that is something you're not especially bad at. People have this idea that your career needs to be something that you're great at off the bat. It naturally comes to you. And again, that's not true at all. There's a lot of people who get by very well in their career and they do a very average job. And believe it or not, some do a below average job and they still get by and make a lot more money than you and me. So don't get too discouraged and don't overthink it. If you are starting from scratch learning something, that's okay. And if it's something that takes you a minute and you're not naturally good at, that is okay. Third, you want to figure out what you can tolerate. This is really what is compatible with your lifestyle and your personality. What I mean by this is if you are agoraphobic and you are an extreme homebody, yeah, remote jobs might be the thing for you until you figure out that problem. And if you have horrible social anxiety, don't get a sales job where you need to talk to people who don't want to talk to you and are pissed off. Don't do that. Something to really consider as well is while you need to find what's compatible, you can't be picky in the beginning of your career. And it's because people with more experience are more qualified and they can be pickier. And if you're not there yet, then just being picky is going to get you a lot of nothing and you're not going to get anywhere. So you might need to take something that's less than ideal. In reality, there's a reason some jobs pay more than others. Sometimes it's because they're really difficult. Sometimes they just kind of suck. And your crappy job you don't need to have forever, but that might be something you have to suck up if you want to make progress in your career early on. Once you've figured out what you want to do for a career, the next thing you got to do is get qualified. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how exactly you do this during my teenage years. And I ended up with this model in my head that I like to call the trifecta of qualifications. It's really the 3 things that are going to determine how qualified you are for any job. First is your education. Second is your network. And third is your experience. So let's start off with education. First thing that comes to mind for most people is a 4-year college degree. And yeah, these are valuable, but you need to think critically about what they're going to do for you. In my opinion, what a 4-year degree will often do is show that you're decently smart, you can show up to something on time, and you can pass tests and things like that. In a more tangible sense, what it does is it gets you past the HR wall, which is essentially human resources department in most places is responsible for hiring. It's kind of different everywhere, but that's generally the case. And they, just to save time, will filter out people who don't have a degree. While this is an important thing that you do need to consider, the other parts of this trifecta can get you past that, and other forms of education can do that as well. On top of that, you want to think about the opportunity cost. And this is what you could be doing instead of spending 4 years working really hard and getting debt, practically not making much money. You don't want to be doing that, because not only could you be working earlier and making money earlier, but you could be investing that money and it could grow over the 4 years. And that's the exact opposite of having student loans build interest against you. A 4-year degree can absolutely be worth it, or just necessary for many careers. Really, I think certifications are the way to go when possible. And this is because they essentially solve all of the problems that normal 4-year degrees have. You can study at your own pace, you just take the exam when you're ready, no homework, no egotistical teachers you need to worry about. And once you pass the test, you just get certified and move on to the next one. And if you don't want to move on to the next one, well, then you're just done. And certifications only usually cost a couple $100s. Really, if you were essentially starting an IT career, you wouldn't want to go to a 4-year university to get the education that you need. You could spend a few months getting entry-level certifications while working, because it doesn't take all day like a normal university does. And then, yeah, maybe a degree would put you at a bit of a disadvantage if you don't have one, but you have extra years and hours every single day you can put into your network and your experience to make up for that. I think that's the way to go if you're really serious about getting your career off to a good start. When it comes to education, while more is always beneficial, you have to remember that non-certified education is never going to do much for itself when it comes to progressing your career. Take myself, for example. I study health, nutrition, fitness obsessively in my free time, mostly just because it's fun and interesting for me. But it would be difficult if I was trying to get a job with an employer in this industry, because I don't have any certified education. There's nothing to prove really what I know besides maybe an interview, but I'm not really likely to get the interview if I'm just going off trust me, bro, when it comes to my experience. The second part of the trifecta of qualifications is your network. And people get a bit jaded when they hear this, because they just think it's nepotism and it's having connections and favors. And, if someone likes you and knows you, yeah, you are more likely to get a job, but it's not always simple nepotism. A good way to think about it is your network is simply your relationship with other professionals, ideally in your industry. Because once people get to know you, they know that you're smart, they know that you're capable, and they know that you're great to work with if they're a former coworker or something like that, or a former boss. First, make a LinkedIn. It's just a social media website that works as an online resume. You can put examples of your work on there. You can put your certifications, everything. It's great. You should always keep it updated. And second is when you go to networking events, people often will give you a business card when you're done talking. And you should have one as well, because after networking events, you can go, you take all your business cards, you add people on LinkedIn. You may not know if they're ever going to be someone that's going to be beneficial for your career, or if you're ever going to have an opportunity for them, but those connections will add up over time. And just that little bit of familiarity with each other will go a long way when they're filtering through strangers they don't know and are taking a bit of a risk on when it comes to hiring. Going to networking events, you're going to meet local professionals who have the job that you want. And while they're someone that may hire you at some point or recommend you for their own team, they're also just people you could go to for advice, because people are usually very willing to just sit down, have lunch or coffee with you, your treat, and tell you how they got their foot in the door and give you some advice for their industry. And that goes a very, very long way very quickly. People will always respect someone who's willing to put in the time and the work to build their career. And this is a number one way to show that you are trying to do that. If you feel a bit awkward doing this, a good way to work on your social skills is to read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I was networking when I was still an awkward teenager. No, I was on my grind young. And this book really helped me sort of get the right mindset of how you can connect with people in a way where, deep down, you're not just feeling like a scummy car salesman, and you really understand how to connect with someone and build a relationship and have a positive sort of mindset in conversations. It's kind of hard to explain, but I'd really recommend reading the book, watching a video summary, because it is pretty full of anecdotes. Really take those to heart, and they'll go a long way while you're building your network. Gaining experience. Unfortunately, this is the hardest to get out of the gate. And I think there is a large pushback when people hear, unpaid internships, they hear about volunteering. And one thing about these is they are an investment in your career. It is not the responsibility of whatever place you want to work at to take you in, train you up, spend resources on you to get you to know how to do the job, just to hope you're going to be good at it and not go somewhere else. It doesn't really make much sense. And while, yeah, it is ideal to make money out of the gate, there is a reason that you're doing this, and it's because you are investing in your career. Because the work up front you may not be getting paid for will pay dividends over your full financial career. You can also be building your portfolio, and that's just really a collection of your professional work that you have. For example, if you make websites for a living, it'd be examples of websites you made. And while you do this, you can volunteer, make your first website. Yeah, it might not be great, but the volunteer organization, they get a free website out of it, and they're going to be real happy. You're going to be building your network and making some connections with them. And then at the end of the day, you can at least have this website that is a little bit of a training ground for you to learn. It's an example of something you built from scratch, top to bottom. You know how it works, and that is experience right there. And that's going to be valuable, even if it's not simple numbers on a resume. If you still struggle to get paid with work or to get your first foot in the door with a job doing all of these things, you can always just start freelancing or start your own business at that point. If you can make a pretty decent website, you feel confident about it, you know all the moving parts, you don't really need to wait for an employer to come and start paying you for it. Yeah, it is extra complicated to start your own business. And yeah, maybe you don't want to be doing that in the long term. You just want a simple 9 to 5, clock in, clock out. But this is still a great way to gain that experience and really progress your career. And the last part about gaining experience is that it is pretty difficult up front, but if you are willing to invest the time and the energy, it becomes the easiest thing to gain. After a year or two of experience and you have an entry-level job, it's never going to be difficult again for you to get another entry-level job, assuming that the job market doesn't change too much, because there's still people coming into the industry and people retiring, at least for most industries, and you're going to just get more qualified over time. And you don't need to be hustling and grinding during your whole career. You just need to stick down that job. And a very common tactic is if someone doesn't like their job, they just wait 2 years until they're qualified for the next senior position for their role or whatever it may be. So now you know the career that you want to start and you know how to get qualified. Let's go through a little example. This here is Chad, and the one button he won't push is the grind off button on his Blender, because he's that committed to following Big Money's advice, getting that 9 to 5, and he is absolutely done being broke and corny. What does Chad do? He starts getting some basic experience. He finds a position as a volunteer coordinator. This is a very common volunteer position, not too hard to get. All you really do is call up volunteers, tell them where to go, tell them what to do. They could be kids, they could be teenagers, they could be old people. It doesn't matter. What you are doing is some very basic work that is related to project management. While Chad is volunteering, he also starts watching some YouTube tutorials at home. He learns the basics of different project management tools that companies use. He knows what they're called. He kind of knows his way around them, even if he doesn't have it on his computer, but that's a bonus if he does. And it starts helping him present himself as someone who is knowledgeable and professional when it comes to getting that first job. In addition to that, he starts doing some LinkedIn courses where you get little certification badges of completion on your profile. These aren't the same as big boy certifications that give you a pay bump from your boss or help you get that new job change, but it is enough to make his profile look more professional and to prove that he just has that bit more of education, drive, and experience when compared to the next person. He's also networking, but the bonus is that he's done some of this just by volunteering. Because remember, your network isn't just people you're born knowing, it's creating relationships with people in your community. There are professionals who volunteer. There are retirees who have a lot to offer. And he's creating these connections with people in his community, and he's creating that relationship where they see, hey, this is a nice guy. He's willing to put in the work. I can vouch for him. I'll at least give him a reference if I can't, help him find a job or point him in the right direction. And that is valuable. And if on top of this, he's also going to the occasional networking event, Chad is in a really good place. He's being a Chad, if you will. Thing is, at this point, Chad does see a couple people just get that job out of college or just get that job at their dad's company. And yeah, it's not really fair. Chad just didn't get as lucky as them. But the thing is, as time goes on, he's only getting more qualified. He's getting more connections to be aware of what opportunities can fit him. He's creating a larger presence in the community where people know him and want to work with him. And he's slowly getting more and more qualified for that job through whatever experience he can get his hands on. Not only did Chad get his first job related to project management, which doesn't need to have it in the title, even being something like a marketing coordinator. Yeah, that's kind of marketing focused. He's still in that pipeline and he's not too picky about getting the perfect experience. So now it's been a couple of years and he went from a marketing coordinator to a proper project manager. But even then, Chad, he's evolving. Chad is no longer just a project manager. He's a technical project manager. Thank you very much. So now we get to talk about the fun part of career development. And that is when you start having choices. Move your career in the direction of a job that you may not still love. I mean, no one really wants to project manage 8 hours a day, but it pays the bills and you're way better off than being corny and broke, as Big Money would say. So what Chad did is he specialized. He gets more pay because he specialized, and he's also harder to replace because there's less people doing his job. He specializes in technical projects now, which not all project managers can do. And with that specialization, there are less of those jobs because it is inherently niche. It is nice though, because Chad could always go back to being a normal project manager if he needs to, but he might miss out on that specialization pay and not really have his investment pay off. So if you are thinking of specializing, just consider that. The second way to evolve your career is to go up, to become a senior project manager or a leader. And the benefit of this is, like specializing, you do get more money. And you also get goons and minions in your own little crew of people. So if leadership is important to you, then this is probably the obvious way to go when it comes to building your career. You also get more creative work because you get to delegate. You get to have the things that you don't like doing, other people will do it, at least within reason as a manager. And that leads you for more big picture things, creating whole plans and strategies and how to make something happen. And depending on where you work, this can be where your job starts to get kind of fun for a corny 9 to 5. Let's say you don't love your career path. A third option is to go sideways, to make a lateral change. For example, let's say that Chad, he was a project manager and he kind of missed his marketing coordinator days. And he really just wants to try his hand at marketing now. So yeah, he might not get paid quite as much, but he has a little bit of adjacent experience. And he also, more importantly, has just simple experience with a big boy job in an organization doing projects. And yeah, he may not have all the fine skills that he would need to be successful out of the gate in a marketing job, but he has a lot of the big kind of boulders in place. He could show up, he knows how projects are run, he knows what marketing does, and maybe he's had some experience helping out with that, depending on his previous role. And if not, you already know the ways to get more qualified for this lateral sideways change. Go independent. You could start freelancing. You could start your own business. And this is high risk, high reward. Because one thing people forget is making $100,000 at your day job is not the same as making $100,000 with your side business. Because assuming that's your full-time job, you still need to pay for your own healthcare, depending on where you live, and you probably are going to be taxed more as well. So you might need to make closer to $150,000 just to have the same standard of living you did with a job that made $100,000. Now Chad, the professional, is here with a bonus round. He's coming to us with information because he is just such a Chad in his career at this point. So Chad's pro tip number 1 is that the years of experience on your resume tend to beat all else. There is a point in Chad's career where he was the best project manager ever because he just did not stop grinding day or night. He was a machine. I do not want to be him, but man, you gotta respect that. But despite being the best project manager ever, he only had 1 year of experience. And there's a lot of mediocre project managers who have 5, 7, 10 years of experience. He could project manage a circle around them, but they still beat him in interviews because it is an inherent risk to bet on someone who just doesn't have the experience that you would like for a job. First, this will work against you early in your career, but once you get your foot in the door, once you get momentum going, again, you don't need to grind and hustle this whole time. You can just stick out your job, gather those years of experience on your resume, and you will get more qualified. Unsustainable amount of work is not a good long-term strategy, but sometimes it's required in the short term. Because remember, Chad couldn't really get started because he didn't have a ton of luck out the gate. He had to build up his LinkedIn. He had to start building relationships in his community and have a network. And he also had to just volunteer. It was not huge, it was a few hours in the weekend, but he probably didn't want to be doing that, really. While these things aren't sustainable to do in the long term every day, it's an investment. You do the hard work up front and it will pay dividends and dividends for the rest of your career. And you will be much, much better off than not having to invest the work up front and just skating out whatever work comes by without that. It's a very wise tip from Chad, has a bit of nuance here, is that hopping jobs every 2 or 3 years is the fastest way to progress your career, but the grass is not always greener. One thing I've noticed is over the past decade or more is that hopping jobs is becoming more and more commonplace. Back in the day, when someone would just get a job, work there till they retire, and this was a red flag for employers because they didn't want to hire you if you were just going to leave in a couple years. You weren't worth investing in. But now there aren't so many employers who invest in their employees out of the gate and train them up. This is why Chad had to jump through all those hoops. There is a little bit less loyalty towards employees depending on where you work, but less is expected from employees. You can hop your job every 2 or 3 years to really maximize how fast you progress in your career. And it's not the red flag that it used to be. I don't think many people really act like it is these days, but sometimes you'll get advice from people saying you can't do that. And I do think that's a bit out of date. This is because it's a lot easier to convince a new employer to hire you when, let's say you're a project manager, you have 5 years of experience. They want a senior project manager who has 5 years of experience. Yeah, you don't have senior in your name, but it's not going to be a huge gamble to hire you for that job because you're just qualified for it. But it will be a lot more difficult to convince your boss to give you a promotion to just become a senior project manager. If you're doing very similar work and you're just getting paid more, that is how you invest in your employees and keep them. But a lot of employers will take the risk and just hope they can keep milking out the current situation, whether they're doing that just out of necessity or, just working in their own self-interest. Remember, if you do make this hop, there is no guarantee that it will be better. Yeah, you're going to get the pay that you was promised and you're going to get that fancy title, but you could have a boss that just sucks and you could have a lot more work and you could have a toxic work environment. Yeah, maybe you're making an extra $10,000 a year, but there are a lot of professionals who would sacrifice that pay bump for all of these small benefits that you really are gambling on when you change jobs. That's it for my first video. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. I will try to reply to all of them. This is the first video on my channel, so I'm sure there's not going to be too many comments. And I am on social media. I'm on Instagram, Cole P. Warren. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me, handsome man in the photo. And I don't do much coaching now, but I do know a lot about fitness and nutrition and have definitely enough experience to do some coaching. Maybe interested in doing that. I'm not going to make that content quite yet, but hey, I'm open to it if you're really interested. And of course, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Peace.